Good morning, folks. Please welcome, here they are, come on, gentlemen, the 5 nominees for Outstanding Director of a Feature Film by you, the members of the Directors Guild. As we get settled in here, I saw a quote this morning from the playwright Bertolt Brecht, who said that art is not about being a mirror reflecting reality. Art is being a hammer that shapes it. All of you have made films that have shaped our realities and shaped cinema. And we are honored to be able to be in discussion with you. So thank you all. Let me introduce each one of you. This is Sean Baker, director of Honora. James Mangold, director of A Complete Unknown. Edward Berger, director of Conclave. Brady Corbett, director of The Brutalists. And Jacques Audiard, director of C'est So, Emilia Perez. You know, in a way, we should just look at the films and not talk at all, because the films are really what speak for your talent. But we're lucky enough to have you here with directorial team here to hopefully learn how you do what you do. So my first question is, what do you do the night before? What's your homework for the next day of shooting? And what's the first thing you do when you arrive on a set? Sean, what's your homework? What's the first thing you do when you arrive on set?
Oh, let's see. Hello, everybody. And hello.
It's great to see you,
It's
Sean.
great to be here. The night before, it's just a bunch of panic. And with this film in particular, I'm also the writer on this film, so I was actually doing some rewriting usually the night before, especially with the longer set pieces, when I realized a couple of days into these longer set pieces that adjustments had to be made. So we would be spending our evenings prepping for the next day in terms of like literally adjusting the script and dialogue.
Would you also be dealing with, and how would you be dealing with how you might do the next day, and also dealing with the characters that you're going to be creating the next day? Would you deal with that also in that night?
There was a little bit of that, but a lot of, I think Drew Daniels, who shot the film, my wonderful cinematographer, we didn't previs, but we had a plan, a visual plan. We knew how we were covering certain scenes. So that really didn't change. I think with this film, it was really about the script. It was about adjusting the script along the way.
Are you able to sleep?
You know, when I'm shooting, and I don't know about you guys, but I feel like I can live on about 4.5 hours of sleep for those, for that time.
And when you arrive on the set, what's the first thing you do?
Again, it's about, if I did make changes the night before, it's about presenting it to everybody and trying to articulate those changes as well as possible. Because, that can be frightening. And I remember the first time I did it, it was the second day of that big, the home invasion set piece, where I realized adjustments had to be made. And I walk in there and put my laptop down on the dining room table. I'm talking about the mansion that we shot in. I put the lap book down, and I'm like, okay, I've rearranged the dialogue, guys, huddle around. And I looked up and I just saw fear. I saw a lot of fear. And especially on on Karin's face, Karin Karagulian, who plays Toros, who just spent weeks memorizing, and he went white. I said, no, guys, we have time. I asked production, we have 2 more days on this. So so really it's just about, getting the cast and crew always in a comfortable place, because when they're comfortable, then you relieve as much stress as possible, and you can all just have fun and be in the moment. That's how I see it.
Got it. James, the night before, what's your preparation?
Well, it's similar to what Sean described. I mean, it changes with every movie to the degree that you're actors have different cooking times and different ways of functionings, and your script can be in different places. I too was rewriting on Complete Unknown as we went along because I was learning. You're learning from what's getting put on its feet, and but usually, on this movie I was cutting in the evening too. I was on an Evercast with my editors in LA, and which the time shift kind of worked perfectly for most. I find that really helpful. You kind of can't wait to see the material. You want to, a movie isn't just a series of shots, it's how they go together. And what's happening when they do, and what isn't happening when they do. And so that would happen. But the one thing I thought that was really wonderful on this movie in particular was Timothy would call, or I'd call him almost every night, and we would just on the phone read through the next day's work. And it became a kind of tradition. One I had done in other ways with other actors. I'd get on and kind of just take the moment with key actors to go over the scene, and in that way solve those kind of first tier questions that were going to greet you in the morning. Those kind of he's having the experience of playing Dylan in the movie. He's learning every day too. Have we talked about this scene since we started? And kind of putting it in front of us, and just I play everyone. I play the women. I play whoever it else is. We just read it over the phone, and we just stop and go, "Did that bump you?" or "da da da," or "What do you think?" And then, in a way, that was solved for the morning of. I didn't have to do the trailer visit and that. I would arrive on set and be ready for my toughest moment. The part I have to fasten my seatbelts for most making movies is the first hour on set, in which you're tired. 4.5 hours is probably the norm too, and you're hit with so much. Everything, the day is determined in the first hour of the day. What is the blocking? What is the first rehearsal? What is the shit you're encountering that you either heard about last night, or what are you dealing with? And the solutions to most of those problems will happen in the first 50 minutes on set. And so it's kind of once you get past that, the fun begins.
Got it. Edward, for you, what's the homework the night before, or if it's the day before and you're shooting night, but the night before, and what's the first things you do when you arrive on a set?
Well, I do the same thing as James. I see the cut of the things we've done before, just because it gives me security, and it kind of. When I remember the first time I went to, the first day at film school, the first exercise we did, I went to the same film school as Sean did. So, about the same time, right?
Which film school is this?
By the way.
At NYU.
Oh, that makes one more. Keep going.
Great, we all went to the same one. So, I remember doing the first exercise on the Steenbeck and having a shot, reverse shot, which I didn't know about, I didn't know about shot, reverse shot. And I realized, my God, they're looking at each other. And it was such a miracle for me. I couldn't believe it. I'd seen it in movies, but I didn't analyze it. So seeing that miracle come to life on the Steenbeck was unbelievable to me, and I still have that. You shoot everything so separately. Yes, there's the wide shot where everyone is together, possibly, but then you wonder every time, is this gonna go together? And then I see the cut and go oh wow. They're talking to each other. It's a dialogue. So I have that miracle, and that gives me sort of a boost for the next day. And then I read the scene on this movie. I didn't write this one, so I had a wonderful collaborator, Peter Strawn, who I would call at night, and I reread the scene for the next day, and then I call if I have a question or if I want to change something, or I'd call him. We'd go over it. And that's probably, and I shot list everything or storyboard everything, just because, again, just having the comfort the next day and to know what you want to do and how you want to possibly start the day.
And what's the first thing when you get on the set?
Well, it's probably, it differs from day to day, but usually it's gathering everyone around and just summarizing what we want to achieve during the day, just the crew. the actors might be in costume, some of the actors might be there, and just saying, okay, today we want to do this, get everyone honed in, and there's this one shot that's super complicated. We're going to do it around lunchtime or whatever, and that's what we're going to work towards. And then just get everyone in that mode. And then I, talked to Steph. I stole Jacques Audiard's cameraman because I adored his work on his movies Prophète and Rust and Bones, Stéphane Fontaine. So we go through the day and start lighting and setting up. But then I don't, I wait for Rafe and everyone to come, the actors to come, and then rehearse and then determine what we shoot first.
Got it. Brady, for you, what's your homework in the evening or day for the next day? What do you do?
I'm usually trying to close financing.
And how does that go?
Well, that really depends. I'm not very dogmatic. I don't have a ritual. Generally, I'm shooting in places where there's a lab, just because, part of what determines where we shoot, because we're shooting on celluloid, is if there's a lab, so that we don't have to ship the neg, because we usually can't afford to. It just would be a bit too expensive to be sending it back and forth. So it's very old-fashioned. At the end of every day, we all of my heads of department come with me, and we watch yesterday's footage, and we sort of talk about what's working, what's not working. I mean, specifically with VistaVision, what's funny about the format is that it's very unforgiving. So if it makes something that's beautiful look much, much more beautiful, but it makes something which is ugly extremely ugly, because it's so high fidelity that if something is flatly lit, it actually just kind of looks like a sitcom.
Got it.
And so there was a bit of a learning curve for us, because we did some very rudimentary testing, but you don't really know until after a couple of days exactly how it's behaving in terms of how highlights are rolling off and on a set, a costume, etc. So you're making small adjustments, of course.
When you arrive on the set, what's the first thing you usually do? Where do you go? What do you do?
I don't have a ritual. I sort of, depending on, I'm trying to respond to a space. I don't storyboard, and part of the reason I don't storyboard is that in the past, when I have storyboarded, I find that everyone is trying to adhere a bit too closely to these cartoons, and so the thing is that I realize that for example, when you're scouting and you find a frame, let's say that you're shooting on a river or something, but then the tide has changed, and when you get there, it looks like a canal or something. It's not, there's no magnificence, so you have to be very, very nimble. I think you have a very rough idea of what you're doing. And everyone has, a different approach. But for me, what I struggled with, for me personally, with storyboarding, was that I would also get attached to them. Like I would arrive and sort of, we would immediately set up this shot that, made sense 3 months earlier, but the season has changed and everything's changed. So yeah, I don't know. I'm quite nimble, and I work differently with different performers. Some performers really want a lot of attention. Some want to be left alone. I try to read the room to the best of my ability. Who needs what, and you're just. It's an interesting thing, because you're existing for a lot of other people. I mean, especially if you're empathetic and you care about people's personal lives and stuff. It's to be connected to 250 people for 18 months. It can be very moving, very beautiful, but also extremely draining.
Got it.
So,
got it. Jacques, what's the homework that you do before the next day shooting, and what's the first thing that you do when you arrive on a set?
Ok. Le soir, généralement, moi, je ne regarde pas les rushs. C'est mon co-scénariste Thomas Bilguin qui les regarde à ma place et qui me fait des notes. Donc, quand je rentre le soir chez moi, je lis les notes de Tom sur les rushs. Et puis là, normalement, je fais 2-3 tentatives de suicide.
By the way, I want to introduce Nicholas Elliott, who's doing all this hard work for us.
Je traduis déjà ça.
Oui, vas-y.
In the evening, I generally don't watch dailies. It's my co-screenwriter Thomas Bidguin who watches the dailies for me and takes notes, and then he reads me the notes on the dailies every night, and generally at that point I do 2 or 3 suicide attempts.
Et je prépare, après, je relis les scènes du lendemain. Et très souvent, je réécris. Soit je fais des aménagements dans les scènes, soit j'écris d'autres scènes. Alors déjà, ça me prend un petit peu de temps.
Then I reread the next day's scenes, and very often at that point I rewrite. Either I amend existing scenes or I completely create new scenes. So already that takes a fair amount of time.
Après, donc, je dors.
Then I sleep.
Et quand j'arrive sur le tournage, généralement, comme l'assistant m'attend, avec toujours une petite angoisse dans le regard.
Generally, when I arrive on the set, the assistant is waiting for me, nearly always with a little bit of anxiety in his or her eyes.
Là, je lui donne les textes que j'ai fait imprimer.
Then I give him the texts that I had printed.
Il s'absente un petit peu et il va pleurer dans les toilettes.
He goes away for a little while to cry in the bathroom.
Quand il revient, on met en place les scènes à faire. Je prends les textes, les nouveaux dialogues. Je vais voir les actrices quand elles arrivent. Et là, j'ai l'impression qu'elles veulent me tuer.
When the assistant director comes back, we put in place the scenes that we're going to do. Then I take the printouts of the new dialogue and I bring them to the actresses as they arrive. And generally at that point, I have the feeling that they want to kill me.
Et ça va être le début d'une chouette journée.
And that's going to be the beginning of a great day.
As all of you know, and some of you have even spoken to this, casting becomes one of the most essential parts of what we do. What I'm interested in you talking to us about is your audition process, not the casting of the major leads, because we know the complication of it. But if you were casting, and I may ask some specifics about some of the characters in your movie, but you're meeting an actor for the first time. What I'm interested in, what do you say? What do you do? How do you proceed? So, Jacques, let's start with you.
Alors oui, c'est marrant parce que comment je me suis fait cette réflexion, peut-être que c'était une conversation. Comment le casting, pour moi, c'est le moment où le plus grand risque est pris dans le choix. C'est que si on se trompe, alors on va pouvoir éventuellement changer d'acteur ou d'actrice en cours de route, mais c'est déjà trop tard. Et je pense que alors comment donc moi quand je vais au casting, c'est déjà avec ce sens du jeu, de la responsabilité. D'abord, je vais les rencontrer, les gens, on va discuter, tout ça, et très très vite, je vais leur donner des scènes à passer, comme on dit au théâtre. Et les scènes à passer, ce ne seront pas celles forcément du scénario qui est écrit. Ce sera des scènes que j'écrirai juste pour les répétitions. Et donc, on va travailler là-dessus. Et généralement, je demande à la production, voilà, quand je commence à choisir un comédien, je ne veux pas que ça se fasse comme ça. On va travailler un moment ensemble, et puis au terme de ce moment, je saurai si c'est lui ou si c'est elle.
We can't wait. I'm sorry. We don't want to put any pressure on you.
It's funny, you know, I've asked myself about this or had conversations regarding this. You know, casting for me is the moment where you take the biggest risk in terms of the choices that you're going to make. Of course, if you make a mistake, you could swap out an actor or an actress along the way, but it would already be too late. So when I'm going to audition someone, it's the moment when I have the greatest feeling of stakes, of responsibility. And so initially, I'm going to meet this person, we'll have a chat, and then quite quickly, I'm going to give them some scenes to read. And these are not scenes from the screenplay, but screens that I've written simply to rehearse. And together, we're going to work on those scenes. You know,
when I'm starting to choose an actor or an actress, I don't like it to be just like that right away. I ask my producers to give me the time to work with them for a while, and it's at the end of that process that I'm going to know.
And in the conversation that you have with the actor, and in what you ask them to read and the adjustments that you might do, talk about that.
D'abord, ils partent, comment ils lisent le scénario. Ils lisent le scénario, je leur dis que c'est pour tel ou tel personnage, voilà, donc on va discuter du personnage. Mais comment ça, je crois que c'est un processus qu'on suit tous. Et c'est plutôt oui, qu'est-ce que la personne va me dire du personnage. Ça, c'est une chose, faire une analyse littéraire d'un personnage, c'est quelque chose. Mais faire une analyse en jeu du personnage, en acting, ça c'est autre chose. Et que c'est pour ça que assez vite, je vais passer dans un processus de travail avec un comédien, puis après 2 comédiens ensemble, de savoir comment ça dialogue. Est-ce que le comédien ou la comédienne, excusez-moi, je dis le comédien, c'est générique, là je vais me prendre les pieds dans le tapis ici. Et la chose intéressante, c'est de savoir si la personne est capable de jouer avec quelqu'un. Qu'est-ce qu'elle va transmettre à cette personne-là? Comment elle va exister? Et j'ai remarqué une chose. C'est trop long pour toi?
T'inquiète.
You know, I have a feeling maybe what we should do is let Nicholas translate, and then we'll have Brady answer while you're translating.
No, then I'll forget.
Okay, fair enough. I got it.
Et comment, oui, c'est ça. Et comment le comédien va jouer avec l'autre? Comment il est en face de l'autre? Est-ce qu'il l'écoute vraiment? Est-ce que j'ai le sentiment qu'il l'écoute vraiment? Et comment, ça c'est une autre chose, c'est une autre étape, c'est quelle conscience du temps va avoir l'acteur qui joue, de sa temporalité. Je crois que les très grands, j'ai croisé des très bons acteurs, ils se rendent absolument maîtres du temps de la scène. Et ça, c'est prodigieux.
Okay. We're all going to translate now.
J'aurai toujours cette tête-là quand il écrit.
So first, I have the actor or the actress read the screenplay, and I tell them, I'm looking at you for this character, and we talk about the character. I think all of us, follow this same process. But then the question I ask myself is, what is this person going to say about the character? To have a literary analysis of the character is one thing, but what analysis is this actor or actress going to give me of the actor, of the character through the acting? That's another thing, the analysis through the acting. And then quite quickly, we get into a work process together. First I'm looking at the actor alone, then, and by the way, I'm saying actor just so I don't get mixed up, actor or actress. We get into a work process. Quickly, I bring 2 actors together, and I'm looking at that point at how the actor I'm casting is working with the other person. What are they passing on to the other person? Are they really listening to the other person? Am I getting the sense that they're really listening? Yeah. Then, the next stage is to check out what awareness of time this actor or actress has, of the temporality. I've had the luck of meeting some great performers in my life, and those people can master the time of a scene, and that's really something that I'm looking for.
Interesting. Nicholas, you got it? Brady, if he's checking, we'll go back. But same question for you, Brady. In terms of when you're having an audition, particularly with actors you don't know, you're meeting them for the first time, what's your process?
Well, as some of you might know, I was an actor for many years. I stopped about 13 years ago, and I found the audition process to be quite brutal because people would sometimes send you 13 pages of material or something for a couple of, with maybe 48 hours notice, sometimes even less. So I try to be very respectful of everyone's time, which is to say that I don't do any auditions at all unless I have to. For all the main roles, I only make offers, including usually all the principal roles, because usually there's a body of work that someone has, even if they're 25 or 24 years old. For example, Emma Laird, this young woman who played Alessandro Nivola's wife in the film. I had seen her in a couple of things, and I knew she was very competent, and I loved her for the role, so I asked her to do it, even though she had not been in very much. And then, you know, the exception to that rule is when I'm either casting children, or if I'm casting something locally, like when I'm shooting abroad, and so I usually try to give someone just about a page and a half of material, because I want them to be comfortable. And for me, I don't want it to be too challenging, because I don't want them coming in the room shaking. So I usually know, like within 15 seconds, if someone is correct. And then if it's really necessary, then I maybe will say, you know what, that was so nice. Let's just read something cold together that's a little more material, just the two of us. And then, just the two of us will read it back and forth. And that's it. But that's even quite rare. An audition process can be, it's a funny thing. There are people that are very good at auditioning, and yet actually like not quite as good, like in situ. Yeah. So I really I try to take as much air out of the tire as I can, so that it's not no one feels like they have something to prove, because it's not about can you do it. It's about, are you right for it? And that's something, you know, which is, you usually know pretty quickly.
I'm interested in a couple of characters like Josia and Leslie. Were they just people that you knew and seen? Or
yeah. I mean, a lot of, Jonathan, who played Leslie, I had seen in all sorts of films. He was in Jurassic Park and you know, all sorts of stuff. So, you know, we had a Zoom, and I liked him very much, and so that was all.
So every now and then you will still have a conversation, not an audition, but that's.
I always have conversations. So I have a conversation. Yeah, definitely. There's always we always speak first.
Okay, I want to make sure.
We always.
So
speak.
You will meet them.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Sorry, that wasn't clear. No, of course, because that's the most important part is the conversation.
And what kind of conversation might you be having? I mean, interesting enough, but talking about that first part, but the cousin, she has no lines for so much of the time. What might have been the conversation with her to cast her?
You mean with Rafi, who plays Jafia?
Yeah.
Well, Rafi had starred in my previous film, and I work with a lot of the same people again and again. It's a bit like a commune or something, you know. Or a theater troupe. I kind of like. I try to work with the same people as much as I can. Yeah, I mean, we have usually a conversation about the material, and something that's very important to me is that I'm working with someone who's oriented. Like, I've struggled sometimes when someone just fundamentally doesn't understand, you know, what the themes of the film, or you know, what that happens sometimes. So it is important to me that even if I'm working with someone very young, like 7 or 8 years old, because my first film starred a 7-year-old, and he was just such a special boy, and he was so smart. And now we had a beer together recently, because now he's 20 years old, and you know, he's exactly the same guy at 20 as he was at 7.
So you might use him again.
Oh, I mean, I guarantee it. Yeah.
In terms of, let's do one more. If you were in the Zoom conversation with someone you didn't know, what might be again, are you going to talk about themes? Are you going to talk about, what will you talk about?
You know, what you talk about with anyone you've just met, where they're from and their background, and it's just a conversation. I wish I had, you know, rituals or dogmas or philosophy about these things, but actually I have a philosophy about the themes that the films are investigating, but that's kind of it, and the rest is just on a case-by-case basis.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Edward, for you, casting, I know that you believe that it is essential for the whole experience. Auditioning someone you don't know, what's that process?
Well, I didn't know Ray Fiennes, and I didn't know Stanley Tucci, so I asked them to come in and audition. No, of course.
They might have.
So when they auditioned for me, in this movie, I had a lot of principals who are seasoned actors. You know, obviously you can't audition them, and I feel this. I mean, they wouldn't come, but but I think you know, when I send them the script, you know, then we meet afterwards, and it's much a casting me as is, you know, they're casting me as I'm casting. Are we going to make the same movie? What are you going to be interested in? Rafe, one of the questions Rafe asked me, are you interested in the, you know, sort of in the interior journey of the people, or in that detective story? And of course I was interested in the interior journey.
said no.
Yeah, no, I just want to make an action film. Yeah. And so I think, you know, we're casting each other. We're looking at, are we going to make the same film? Because we don't want to find that out on the set. You know, when you meet Edward Norton, you know, like he's gonna like look at you and go like, "What's your plan?" Right? So, so we just want to get that out of the way, so that we start. And we're still gonna be nervous on the first day if we're gonna want to make this. And you find each other in the first week or 2 weeks to find, like, you know, that they have to make themselves so vulnerable. They have to basically undress in front of 200 people. They need to trust that person that's gonna shoot them. So, and you slowly give that trust during the shooting. But what I find really important is, in this case, you know, sometimes you have sort of, in this case, I had these principals and then a lot of bit parts from Italy or from other countries. And I need to cast all of them. Even if they just say hello.
When you, for example, all the cardinals that we see, and some of them do not speak, but you have separate shots of various ones where they're smoking or talking. You're casting them as well. How do you go about that?
Yeah, I cast, well, they come in, and, you know, the dialogue usually is just like, Bellini has 50 votes, you know, that's their dialogue. So they don't have to learn much, you know. And I just need to, basically, kind of like Brady says, they walk in the room and you know, oh, that person's gonna be good. And then you just wanna hear, and you have maybe 3-4 different ones coming in for that one role. And then you just want to hear it once, and it's the tone that's more important. I actually don't need to look at the face. I just kind of listen. And the way they say it, for example, there's a wonderful actor who sits behind, and he's fairly well known in Italy, and all he does is sit behind the front desk and read the amount of votes that people, and he just did it so beautifully, the tone of it, that you think, like, I just want to listen to this guy, you know, like he just fits in. And if you don't do that, someone will come in and you will notice in the whole movie that that tone is not quite right. And you end up cutting it out most of the time. If I don't cast, or if, you know, there's an emergency, the actor gets sick, you have to replace him the next day or something, somehow you end up cutting those scenes.
Got it.
Very often.
In those faces of those cardinals who do not speak, you're also casting them. How's that process for you?
Well, that's you know, you have, you know, now we're in the DGA, so you have a wonderful team of people, ADs, and I went to Italy, and you know, we all love Paolo Sorrentino's movies. So I look at his credits, and he has great extras, supporting artists. I mean, they're brilliant. So I look at the credits and who does the casting for, who's the second AD for Paolo Sorrentino? And I call her up. And she wants, and luckily I had a lot of 80-year-old people who are out of jobs, you know, so they sit around drinking coffees, and she can just walk around Rome and go like, do you want to be in a movie? They go, yeah. And then, you know, she casts them.
And some of them, out of curiosity, are non-actors. Some of them just the person.
All of them.
All of them.
I mean, all these guys are just from the street, and that's sort of, and they just look great, yeah. And they have interesting faces, and then she casts them and brings them in, and we talk about it, and then, you know, we should just shoot them.
Got it.
Yeah.
I'm interested in what you say.
But she did all the work.
Got it.
You know, she did all the work finding these people, and I got that from Paolo.
Fabulous, fabulous. James, for you, a casting process, someone that you didn't know who's coming in, what's the process?
Well, first of all, and this I concur with a lot of what everyone else is saying, audition, the whole concept of audition makes me uncomfortable. In the sense that when I first started going to auditions, the casting director would read a scene and I'd see what Brady described, it occurred to me that the whole thing is cruel beyond measure, the way it's conducted. Obviously, there's going to be some kind of feeling out of each other that's going to have to occur. But there couldn't be a more, the only way it's more brutal is if you ever directed a commercial and you see the absolute horrendous way actors are treated in commercial auditions. But in in a movie, I find there's several things I have to immediately undo as a quote audition process starts. One is to make sure, and I still fail at this because I'm somehow not scary enough about it, is that do not tell the agents what you're looking for. So they tell their clients, the actors get this shitty fucking pencil version of what the role is because the actor will get the sides and then they will call their agent and go, well, what are they looking for? And then right there, the agent destroys their client's career because they go, hooker with a heart of gold or blah, blah, blah. And then suddenly what comes in, you're like, what in fuck? Who told you this? And it's like, oh, the person I give 10% of my income to. And that is devastating. And also the extra stuff they throw in, make sure you look hot or make sure you blah, blah, or dress like a gentleman or like all this horse shit that the actor gets poisoned with before they even enter your space.
Then how do you handle it?
Well, first of all, you do what you can to actually make everyone aware that if they come in dressed like it's Halloween, I'm sending them home. And you also, but there's another thing, which is it's evolved. So what I've, in the last 10 years, 12 years, what I do more often is it started early on because I get frustrated because the casting director would be, and I felt like, just give it to me. Like you're giving them nothing. And when you play the scene with an actor, you may be good or bad on your end, but you actually are directing them by how you're hitting the ball to them, and that changes a lot. And you're also saying to the actor, I'm willing to put myself here with you, good or bad, so don't be as freaked out because I may look like a schlemiel doing this with you. And but the other thing is trying to say, kind of what Brady was saying, I do want to work a lot of material, but I don't want you to learn any of it. I will hit you I'll put aside an hour, 2 hours, and we are going to cold read. And then if we want to keep going with the scene, we'll keep going with the scene. If we want to jump to the next scene, we'll jump to the next scene. Most actors, after 3 times reading the scene, are practically going to be off book anyway, unless it's like unless you're having them do, a Willy Loman monologue. And the reality is that what happens, it's not about what they put on tape. It's about what's happening between you and how, and then this gets to what Jacques said, which I thought was really profound and true, which is you don't want the kind of collegiate literary analysis of your screenplay or character. It's not that I find it offensive, but that it's going to be in their way the whole fucking time because that's not what we're doing.
Was there a part on this that was a challenge for you to cast?
I thought Joan Baez was going to be a big challenge, and then Monica just appeared, and it was like so over the second she did. And
was there, for example, casting Woody Guthrie?
Well, that was hard. That was hard because it's hard to convince someone to work for no money for 3 days with no lines, and or a week or whatever it was, and who at the same time can somehow conjure, who could do it. I mean, there's plenty of people who would do it, but can they do it? And do they embody, that was a real challenge. I mean, and it takes an actor who understands that it's not about how much you talk.
Had you worked with Scoop before?
No, just admired him and just had a feeling, did a Zoom with him. I mean, 9/10 of it is that initial, I think there's several big misconceptions in my book about acting. One is that we compliment actors all the time on their chameleon-esque ability to change. And first of all, I think it's not true. Like Meryl Streep is kind of the same person in every movie and brilliant. So is Jimmy Stewart. So is Cary Grant. So is John Wayne. So is Dustin Hoffman. I have no problem with that. But let's stop pretending just because they have an accent in one and not in another that they're bringing a huge part of who they are to everything they do. And so when we're casting, even if it's a not named person, you're looking for that thing that they bring that will fuse with the thing you brought if you wrote the script, and and how that's going to fuse.
Jesse, casting, is Big Bill Mansfield, is he a real
He's
player?
a real blues player.
And how'd you
He
find
had
him?
never acted before.
And how'd you find him?
I kept rejecting tapes and things they'd send me, and I'd be like, first of all, it like makes you sad because they go, give me a real blues player, and then any blues player, there's all sorts of people who call themselves blues players that are some kind of fusion weird shit that I never heard of that is like, that's not a blues player. And finally they found, he's Muddy Waters' son. And they found him in the Atlanta area, and he just put himself on a tape, and it was so clear from the moment. I mean, we spoke and Zoomed, but it was so clear from the moment, just the fearlessness, because he's not an actor, he's also not filled with all the anxiety of what this means when he's doing it. He just landed there and said the lines and played guitar and was fucking great.
Yes, he was.
Yeah.
Big Bill did it for you.
Yeah.
Now, actually, Sean, you take a credit as casting. So this is obviously something that is passionate for you. And the variety of characters in your piece, from the opening scene of the girls who are doing the dancing and the men who are doing the dancing, and scenes where Toros is going to these various places to try to find Vanya, to really skilled actors. What's your process here?
Well, we really mix it up. It starts very early. There's sometimes in the case of Enora, 3 actors in mind before I wrote the screenplay: Mikey Madison, Yor Borisov, and Karin Karagulian. My wife and producer, Samantha Kwan, a fellow producer, she is also a major part of this, helping me with a lot of the supporting and background. I'm just realizing now up on stage that we haven't actually done the formal audition process since Florida Project, when we had to see all those children. We had children coming in, and yes, it's the worst thing in the world. It makes everybody uncomfortable, and it's very hard to judge. But it is necessary in some situations. But with our films, no, it's no longer necessary. I think everybody is cast through either an offer or a self-tape, where we reach out and ask for a self-tape or something like that. And again, I'm kind of mixing it up with my films, where it's like seasoned professionals and first-timers. In this case, in Enora, my entire main cast and most of my supporting are seasoned professionals. And so they were basically offers.
When you say an offers, for example, the actor who plays Gornick, one of the Gopnik's guys,
yes.
one of the hugs, the one who gets his face smashed in and puts the tortellini on his head.
Vache Tavmasian.
So how would the process of casting be?
Okay, so that was a little bit of a difficult one. The person we originally thought was going to play that character was no longer available. And it was down to the wire. It was probably 3 weeks from production, maybe. Karin, I said, Karin, I need Karin Karagulian, who is basically my consultant for all things Armenian, right? I'm saying, help me out. I need, let's go for some comedians. And he said, well, Vache, he's like basically Armenia's #1 comedian who happens to be living here in Glendale.
Wow.
So I was like, hell yeah. And we did a self-tape. It was amazing.
Do you remember the scene he did for you? Or do you recall?
No, I'm
That's
sorry.
okay. So, but he did the self-tape and you saw this.
Self-tape, he made us laugh. He was actually, because we were only 3 weeks out, he just thought we were like, what sort of production is this? Why am I being cast last minute here? They must have problems. But no, we got on it, and then we did a Zoom, and we connected, and off to the races. We just offered him, the one thing I am also aware of now, and it's just happened in the last 2 films, is that because now I've been meeting actors who have seen my films, they kind of are bringing something to the table that they're expecting that I want. And that's usually the truth. They know I'm looking for certain abrasive behavior, outrageous behavior or abrasive attitudes. And so it was interesting that the character of Diamond, who is her rival at the club, played by Lindsay Normington, we were at a screening, an after party, somewhere in East LA, and she actually approached me and said she liked my films, and I just we had a great conversation, and I thought she was striking, her physicality was striking, and we went and had coffee, and it was a wonderful coffee in which I realized how incredibly smart she is and plugged in to both film, but also the sex worker community, being that she's a stripper as well as an actor, and offered her the role right there and then. And so and she knew what she was.
She knew the territory.
She knew the territory, and you can see that in her.
In all of these scenes that I was just talking about, like that opening sequence, and like as Toros is looking for him, are these all real people?
It's a combo. It's a combo.
And sort of how are you? Let's just
well, there's SAG background to a certain degree. Like most of the male clients at the club, SAG background. Most of the dancers are dancers from all clubs in New York. We had a liaison we had to get us dancers. So we would meet with our dancers over Zoom, each and every one of them. And that's an important thing for me to do now for both cast and crew.
What would you talk about with these dancers?
Oh, just giving them just the nature of how we shoot, and of course giving them the rundown of what the film is about, all that stuff, and what we were looking for. And then also there's something that I've been having to do as of late. Just talk about, let's bring positivity to the set. We want no toxicity on set. It's very important for me to meet everybody. We do a Zoom with not just the entire cast, but the entire crew, to everybody, including every PA, every single person. We take the time to Zoom and just be like, let's all have fun together. No toxicity. That's really important.
And by the way, every now and then when you've been having one of these conversations, have you gotten the vibe that?
No, it's actually, I think that Zoom, we just started it with Honora, where we've met with everybody. And it was really, I think they were refreshed. They were like, oh, the director's actually having a conversation with me about how we can make this film together. And it was, I saw the look on their faces. They were actually, it felt like it was something new, for every position.
Did that also apply, for example, again, when Toros is searching through all those different restaurants and restaurants? These are Russians, these are Armenians. Well, how did that work?
That's very different. That's running gun guerrilla craziness. That's where we are literally doing, and we knew that there were certain sections in the film, what we call, that section is called the crawl, where they are literally looking for Yvonne throughout Brighton Beach. And that was like, I was kind of going old school, the way I used to do it, like where I'm almost doing candid camera style, where we're out on the sidewalk, we set up the camera, we just wire our actors, they go in and they interact with locals. And then
how big's the crew at this moment?
The crew on the sidewalk is approximately maybe 10 people.
And so those 10 people are walking into this restaurant?
No, only the actors are walking in.
Where's the camera?
The camera's out on the sidewalk. And then as soon as we get it, we walk in there and politely say, hello, sir or ma'am, if you look over there, there's a camera, and we're shooting an independent film here, and you were just part of the scene, and these are actors, and could you sign this release for us? And it works almost 99% of the time. The only time it didn't work for me and really bit me in the ass was on Tangerine, shooting one of the bus scenes here in LA, because people are more savvy about
Yes, they are. They're not going to sign on the bus.
So I wouldn't budge.
Let's talk about staging. And I'm going to take sort of a scene from each one of your films to sort of, for you to explore with us. And the one I would like you to talk about is the fight at the house. But we'll maybe talk about locations we have times, because each one of you have found spectacular places to shoot. But specifically at the house, where she is blind and tacked, and Toros and the boys or the Gopniks are on her. Talk about how you staged that. How did it begin? What did you do to get to the place? you inevitably did, which is an amazing sequence.
Okay, well, thank you. Luckily, I was able to see the house before even getting there because it happened to be on the market 5 years before we shot, so it was on Zillow. And I literally saw this mansion on Zillow, and I asked my amazing location manager, Ross Broder, to get it for us, and he did. But it was great to be able to be here in West Hollywood and write for the mansion and be able to see, because there's 100 photos. And so I'm thumbing through and being able to stage it where I'm going to be. And then, when we finally were in the space, I don't storyboard either, but I do shot lists through Artemis, that app. So when I'm on set, I can use Artemis, and I know the different focal lengths and the lenses we're using. And
We have somebody.
Drew is there with me, of course. Okay. Drew Daniels is there with me, my cinematographer, and we block it out. And we were tight on time, and we scheduled it for 6 days. And after that second day of shooting, I knew we needed more time. So we stretched it to 8. We shot pretty much chronologically.
So if you're shooting chronologically, there's this moment when a number of things are broken, smashed.
Yes.
I'm really interested in how you develop what's going to be smashed, how many times you did it, et cetera.
Well, it was Mikey and Yura doing their own stunts, number one. So that was, And it was approximately 3 days in when or maybe the second day when it was all going down. We had a stunt coordinator there. So of course they would run through it at quarter speed. And we would say, this is the vase this lamp goes there, this lamp goes there, try, Mikey, I know you're going to be blind, but try to kick the vase. And she did. And it was, it was from what I remember, a very anxious moment, not knowing if we were going to get it. But, then when
a number of those shots are, in fact, long shots. We're not talking about lots of coverage.
Oh, yeah, but the one biggie, it's a long shot, but it was also, we knew the in and out. It wasn't like we were running this long scene. It was the moment where everything gets smashed. And I think it was actually we may have done a second take, but we got it on the first take. And it was almost going to be very difficult to recreate everything. So I, from what I remember, and my AD is, I think here, Lisa Mann, maybe she can tell me. I don't think we did. We did a second take, but it wasn't nearly as.
When Gornick gets kicked and knocked down, was that? Did you have a stunt person for that?
Or did he play that? Vach, there's a double for when Garnick gets kicked in the face and goes through the glass.
There's also something else that happens within this sequence, which is everybody is talking at the same time. And it becomes quite delicious. Do you remember the evolution of that? Was that in your script before you got there, or was that part of the process as you rehearsed it?
That's rehearsal, because it's hard to write overlapping dialogue, but I encourage it. While we're rehearsing it, we see where the windows are. We see where the space is that okay, that needs to be filled. Does anybody have an idea? Give me give me something or just an expletive, throw it in there. Let's fill everything. Let's fill the space.
Wow.
And, it's not like only in one scene did we actually get people's separate, dialogue. We shot that stuff real. So we had all the overlapping dialogue, and I edit, so I'm okay with that. I know that if things get really hairy, we can always ADR.
Got it. And Mikey's screaming, which is very specific. Do you remember how that also evolved?
Yeah, well, we didn't really truly hear it until that first take, because I didn't want her to rehearse so as soon as we do that, the first take with her screaming, my God, it echoed through that entire mansion. We heard later there were, crew members on the other side of the mansion extremely disturbed and having to hold their ears for hours. She screamed. Yeah, she screamed for a number of hours, and then finally, I think, or maybe 2 hours, and then finally was like, "Sean, we better stop, or I'm not going to be able to do this tomorrow."
Wow.
So she could gauge her. She knew her.
Exception in that sequence is also these very big close-ups on her eyes and mouth. Do you remember how that evolved in terms of what you were doing?
Those were predetermined, and we knew when we were going to get those. I mean, she has such striking eyes, and I really wanted to capture those, but capture them at the right moment. So it was more about when the negotiation was happening, and we were trying to read exactly what she's thinking in this moment, whether she's going to agree with these men or just bluff them. So that was the moment to go in. And we had these incredible Lomo anamorphic lenses that allowed close focus. And so we were able to get these really beautiful shots of her face.
James, thank you for this. In terms of staging, particularly the end sequence, when the electric guitars, when he's, and particularly when they all try to turn off the sound system, this is a complex sequence because you have everybody in it, including, I think, one of the most wonderful, delicious fights that I've seen in a film in a long time. Talk about the evolution of that.
Well, it is kind of a kind of obligatory scene. I mean, almost every cast member, save Elle Fanning, by that point, is there. So you're managing a lot. I mean, I think the way I relate to staging is really just, again, how to process a space, how you process the space in relation to the story you're telling. And that will help you understand. Sometimes I'll board, sometimes I'll shot list, sometimes I'll just come in. More so, I board but never look at them again. So it becomes kind of more of an act of prep and being able to talk with people about what you're going to need or not need for the scene than it is a kind of, Dumbo's feather on the day, because it kind of becomes so useless so quickly with how much, if you're alive to what's happening around you, is happening. But in relation to a scene like that, the only way I can really think to answer is to say that the space and how the space processes through the story is the way I figure out how I'm going to move people around. Obviously, it's still a dance with my actors and everything else, but that, for instance, to be specific, okay, so you're making a movie that culminates but also features many scenes of people in concert. We've seen that a million times. How do we see it most often? Kind of from third row center, or maybe tracking back and forth, looking at kind of the premium seat in the house, what it looks like from the audience. Well, this is something I learned. This is the second time I made a movie about a musician, but it kind of applied even to the race car movie, Ford Ferrari, I made, which is I don't want to use the vernacular in race car movie. I don't want to use the shot structures of ESPN. I don't want to avoid them. Like, they're only going to be seen if you're looking at a TV. That's the way they cover it.
Right.
The way we're going to live in the race is the way the drivers and the pit crew live in it. And similarly, in Walk the Line and in this movie, I felt that in Walk the Line, it was about two people who fall in love and have intimacy only in front of 10,000 people and then return to other marriages and then have to come back. They can only be alone in front of it, like in a situation like this. Right. So that's a really beautiful contradiction to shoot. You can't shoot it from out there looking here. So you end up being involved in what do I see back there? What do I see back there? What do rakings and what if the camera lives up here? And this is my background. And that became something very important to me in the Dylan movie as well, because I don't think there's anything of interest from the audience side. There's even actual documentary footage of him singing that concert from that position. So the whole point would be to invade the intimate arena that's impossible to invade if you were shooting the thing live, and offer the audience something no documentary or nothing else can offer, which is the camera completely in the fucking way of what an audience would see, and connecting people to what they'd never see in the audience, which is who's over there and who's over there and who's freaking out over there in that sense. And so a little bit like, so I take that general philosophy of shooting, which kind of defines where the camera's going to live. And once you start to think, as we all do, in a cutting pattern, you start to collect these Legos and you know what you need to glue them together and to make them work seamlessly. And then it was the planning of where is the soundboard? And this is with my production designer, Francois, and we are trying to figure out, because the other thing that happens that so determines how you block a scene, I mean, one is you find a house on Zillow or in location photos, and you adapt to it, which is what you have to do. That's where a movie becomes a really good movie, is where it's built, the space is a character in the scene. The scene was written for the space, or at least feels that way. And for me, the arrangement of stuff at this concert, where is the mixing board? Does it have sight lines to the stage? When Pete Seeger goes to the soundboard, will I be able to rake through the crowd to the stage and compress all these things against one another? How do I position these things that create sight lines that are going to force all these simultaneous bays of performance on top of one another?
When Alvin Grossman has the fight, because they're fighting through a piece of a hanging cloth, would you remember how that evolved?
Well, when Francois first started dressing in it, I saw these kind of strange kind of striped curtains that were the actual things they had at Newport. It seemed to me one moment where we'd want a kind of pratfall through a breakaway. We had put in a breakaway fence, and they rammed through it, the two of them. But the point would be that there was, I had this, the way people frame Newport 65 is so much about the way we generally talk about music history, like it's an important cultural event where everything changed, and probably our marketing is doing the same thing. And but I didn't view it that way at all, in the sense that I didn't think my job was to, because then you'll end up with a movie like about the signing of the Declaration of Independence. It's like, I don't want to do a Disney Hall of Presidents of important, moments in the, and so to me, the movie was about a Thanksgiving dinner run amok between folk stars, where the tensions that had been brewing between a family that had been locked together.
But this choice, though, you saw this thing, you'd had a fence, you saw this thing. I'm interested.
But because I thought of it like a Thanksgiving dinner run amok, meaning that I guess the answer is just the comedic nature of it, or the over-the-top nature. It just felt like everything comes off its rails.
Got it.
So that was kind of how the process.
Got it. Cool. Edward, there's an amazing, early on in the movie, a 360-degree shot that starts with, I guess, Rafe talking just before the conclave started. Can you talk about how you decided to do that sequence and how you rehearsed with your actors so that you could then get that shot?
It comes from the progression that I knew I was going to be in that Sistine Chapel for a long time, and I was actually quite worried that they would become boring. I have like 5 election scenes, voting scenes, where a bunch of people fill out their names and put them in a box, and that's supposed to be interesting. So. And those are static scenes because they're all going to be sitting. So why is the camera moving? Like everyone's just sitting and staring at each other and checking each other out. So I knew that was going to be edited. 5, 6 contenders. You need to shoot them all, and a lot of it on Rafe's face from different perspectives to creep inside his head. So I knew, okay, and if that progresses throughout the movie, the decision when first there's chaos also in this Rafe and it's also every time it comes from his character's inner, he's agitated. Later on, he's much more concentrated. And now he's agitated, he needs to prepare, there's hectic. So I'm just starting from him. Going like, well, he's probably, he's in a rush, he needs to get out of there, there's workings around him. And that determines the camera, Then I think, okay, the camera should be moving. And if it's moving, there's 3 people talking, they're moving all over the place. If you chop that up, it just becomes, and I'm not making a Sean Baker movie, like he can do that. And that I knew that movie was not going to be it, like that sequence that we saw earlier can be chopped up wonderfully, like I knew if I'm going to chop up that scene and also I just have one character, so it should be centered around him, one main guy. And so I thought like, okay, it's just going to be one shot. And then I actually go, while I think of, with Stefan, while I think of how to shoot that scene, I'm sort of imagining where he would walk, where the window is, where he looks up, the table that he goes to. And then eventually and I sort of write that down in my own language. There's nothing to do otherwise. And then eventually I go into that set once it's built, and with the iPhone and my ADs and Stefan, and we just walk around and say, okay, walk from here to here, and then we shoot it, and then you think that might work, but then of course on the day Rafe comes, and we do it with him, and slowly. Actually, in that case, he just wanted to know. I don't want to tell him where to walk. I think that's just wrong.
Right.
I just think like, okay, this is the scenes, but then he just asked, which window do I look at? Like, where they're building? And I said, well, because obviously it wasn't there. It was CG. Like it was. We built the stage up to probably the height of this room. And then the entire ceiling with the windows, it's like 50 feet up in the air, so you can't build that. So so he just asked, where's the window? So, well, I thought it was that window. So automatically he goes in that place where I rehearsed. And then I sit the other actors that he's gonna talk to, they're sitting at that table, so he's gonna walk to them. And so it ends up being the shot that we kind of rehearsed, because he kind of wants to know, like, it's a big stage, so where am I going? He's lost, so he kind of wants some guidance. So you gently, without ever, if he felt this guy is forcing me to stand here and I don't want to, then it's never going to work. He just needs to feel it himself, and we walk it through. Probably takes an hour, 45 minutes, and then Stefan puts the camera on the shoulder, and we start walking there, and then eventually it ends up the shot that we shot on the iPhone.
Would there be adjustments? I understand this because you want the actor to own this particular thing. You don't want them to be a puppet to move from one place to the other. But you did have a concept from the iPhone. Would you make, if you wanted to say to Rafe, let's maybe it'd be great if you got up and went to talk to him around the table. Did it ever go that far, or Rafe was getting that without your asking?
Well, if you time out the dialogue, while you do the iPhone shot, there's not enough time for him to walk to the other end of the stage, So it's sort of organically, and ideally you have the same inner motor, Rafe and I, because we start feeling the same movie. So I basically, I'm him, and I'm doing that thing, and I'm basically his stand-in, and then Stefan shoots, and then I walk there and I say the dialogue for myself, and I end up in that position, and somehow it just, I don't know, I never told him go here.
Got it.
But you're also you know him at that point.
Yeah.
So you're kind of vibing when you're doing.
Yeah, it's like you feed off each other.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then by that point we just trust each other, and then he just enjoys. Also, acting must be so hard also, because again, you come and you're making yourself naked, and you have this one shot. It's like, we're all nervous. Like before every shot, I'm worried I'm not going to get it. That shot, I'm worried we're never ever going to get it. And so, but I just keep that inside. But inside you feel that, so you pressure yourself a little bit, and then somehow, it just ends up. It ends. He feels that, and by that time, we sort of trust each other, and we hand each other over, and I trust him, and he trusts me, and then we just do it together.
Brady, let me ask a staging question. There are some beautiful, beautiful shots that are very complex and long. I want to pick one specifically that you'd walk through potentially what you did with your actors and then what you did with your camera. This is a moment when Felicity comes in. She's on her walker, and I think the camera's behind her, and inevitably comes into the house, the Van Buren house, and she confronts Harrison with the fact that he's a rapist. And inevitably, she also falls or trips Harry and knocks her. That's a phenomenally intense moment in your movie, and I'm curious how it evolved.
I am so sorry to be rude, but I have a 10-and-a-half-year-old daughter, and my phone is set to ring only when she calls me.
Right.
Can I?
Yes,
can
you
I come
can. Will
right,
you come back and answer
back?
that?
Yeah, I'm so sorry.
No, Brady, go call your kid.
I'll be right back.
I'll be
You know,
right
one
back.
of the
Sorry.
things, Brady, when we talk about is priorities. How do you live your life while you also are making a movie? That's also a very valid question for all of us to talk about. In fact, we may just do that, but I want to ask Jacques first about staging as well. And I want to talk about the very first dance number. We saw this wonderful one that you just showed, but that first dance number with all those people on the street, with the various literally staging of movement and with her performance. Tell us about how that evolved to become one of the amazing sequences in your movie.
Pour devenir une des séquences les plus incroyables dans ton film.
En fait, c'était la scène que je pensais au début, avant de tourner, que je pensais être la plus difficile à faire. Et donc, c'est un petit peu ma théorie, c'est qu'il faut commencer le tournage par ce qu'il y a de plus difficile, parce que si on y arrive, le reste, on aura confiance.
It was the scene before we started shooting that I thought would be the hardest to make. And my personal theory is that you should always start the shoot with the hardest scene, because then if you pull it off, you'll have self-confidence.
That's actually very smart.
Et donc, alors ça s'est fait quand même. Il y avait beaucoup de choses qui interféraient dedans. Il y avait Zoé qui devait chanter et danser. Il y avait toute une figuration qui devait chanter et danser également. Et on avait un petit problème, c'est que on avait de l'argent mais pas trop, puis surtout on n'avait pas un décor très grand. Tu vois comment le décor devait faire la moitié de la salle à peu près. Et donc je devais la première chose qui s'est posée à moi comme problème, c'était de comment créer cette profondeur que je n'ai pas. Vas-y.
J'y vais. So there were lots of things involved with this sequence. You know, I had Zoe singing and dancing, lots of background actors also singing and dancing. And then I had this little problem, which is that we had money, but we didn't have that much money. And we also didn't have a very big set. The set was about half the size of this room. So I had to solve this question of how to create depth in this relatively small space.
Was it on the stage?
Sorry?
C'était sur un plateau.
Un plateau, pardon.
It was on a soundstage.
Studio. Et au tout début, tel que c'était écrit, c'était Rita descendait de chez elle, et puis il y avait un marché, comme il y a des marchés à Mexico, elle traversait le marché. Et alors l'idée que j'ai eue, d'une part, pour dynamiser tout ça, et pour que ça ait d'une certaine façon qu'il y ait une espèce de sens induit, c'est que elle arrive dans une rue déserte et le monde surgit derrière elle et le marché se construit en même temps qu'elle avance.
So, as it was written initially, in the scene, Rita was coming down from her home into a market like they have in Mexico City and crossing the market. But the idea that I came up with to give the scene a dynamic and also to create a kind of meaning was that she arrives in a deserted street, and suddenly the world emerges behind her and everything gets built as we're watching.
C'est une pure idée de théâtre. On parlait de théâtre tout à l'heure. C'est une pure idée d'opéra ou de théâtre.
It's purely a theatrical or operatic idea. That's where it comes from.
So when they're marching behind her,
Donc, quand ils
and
marchent
then they
derrière eux,
pass her
et puis
and
ils la
move
dépassent.
around, how were you staging that? Did
Comment
you
est-ce que
do
ça,
it,
tu l'as mis
say,
en
in
scène?
slow motion?
Alors je l'ai mis. C'est moi. Alors comment je l'ai mis? Je l'ai mis. J'ai comment. D'abord comment Damien Jallet travaillait tous les jours sur la chorégraphie. Damien Jallet, le chorégraphe, travaillait tous les jours sur la chorégraphie qu'il fabriquait jour par jour avec Zoé. Et d'autre part, il avait tout le travail avec la figuration. Il travaillait avec la figuration, il répétait. Voilà. Et en fait, ce que je voulais, c'était que quelque chose de l'ordre de la vie vraie, du mouvement de la vie apparaisse là-dedans. Et que quand tu dis que le monde la rattrape, le monde la submerge. Elle est portée par le monde.
So our choreographer, Damien Jallet, was working every single day on the choreography. with Zoe. They were creating it together. And at the same time, in parallel, he was rehearsing with the background actors. And what I wanted was for something of real life, of the movement of real life, to appear in this scene. You know, I was saying the world appears, but really it's the world is catching up with Rita and is submerging her.
Et qu'elle soit ce que je voulais, c'est comme les figurants travaillaient de leur côté, Zoé de l'autre, c'est que d'une certaine façon, quand on a commencé à tourner, j'ai jeté Zoé sur le truc et elle est bousculée par le monde. Quoi, ça n'est pas complètement réglé. Elle se prend des petits trucs dans la figure, des machins comme ça. Elle doit se battre, tu vois.
So what I wanted, since the background actors were working on one side and Zoe was working on the other, when we started to shoot, I just threw Zoe in on the deep end, and in a sense, she gets jostled around, pushed around by the world. There's all these little things that she has to work out as she's going that are disturbing her.
Et comme j'avais pas assez de profondeur, en fait, on avait divisé le marché en 3 parties. Et donc, on utilisait une partie, on faisait le raccord, mais hop, il y avait l'autre partie arrivait comme ça. Donc, c'est comme s'il y avait 3 marchés qui se construisaient à la file, quoi.
Mm-hmm. And since I didn't have enough depth, we built the market in 3 parts. So we would be shooting one part of the market and then whoosh, the other part of the market would be there. It was like we had these 3 parts of the market, one after the other, coming up against each other.
C'était un gros bazar, en fait.
It was a big mess, actually.
So there's a moment when someone, because it's talking about violence, there's a moment when someone gets stabbed. Do you remember how that moment emerged? Was that sort of in your script? Did it?
Est arrivé, c'était dans le scénario.
Oui, c'était dans le scénario, mais c'est pas le moment dont je suis le plus fier. Je trouve c'est un peu.
That is in the screenplay, but to be honest with you, it's not the moment I'm proudest of.
In that scene, what is the moment you're most proud of?
Alors, quel est le moment dans ce
Le
film
moment où
tu es le plus fier?
il y a un moment que c'est terrible de dire du bien de ce qu'on fait.
It's terrible to compliment what you do yourself.
Mais en fait, j'aime quand même ça.
But I do like it.
Le moment que j'aime le plus, parce que je trouve que Zoé est absolument irrésistible, c'est quand une planche arrive, l'ordinateur arrive et qu'elle chante assise avec les danseurs derrière. J'aime tout, j'aime la lumière, j'aime l'interprétation de Zoé. Voilà, ça je trouve que arriver là, ça c'était bien.
So the moment I like best is, because Zoe is irresistible in it, is the moment when a board shows up, the laptop is there, she sits down, she's singing, and the background actors are dancing behind her. I like everything about it. I like the light, I like Zoe's acting. It's really where everything is working.
And the light
la lumière
changed.
change à vue à ce moment-là.
Because the light is changing before our eyes at that moment.
Got it. Did you shoot with multiple cameras or was it a single camera?
Non, j'ai tourné avec 2 caméras, mais je te jure qu'il n'y a pas une image de la deuxième caméra qui est dans le film.
So I shot with 2 cameras, but I absolutely swear to you, there's not a single frame from the B camera in the film.
So where did you put the B camera?
Elle était où la caméra
Latérale. Elle était sur le
Lateral,
côté.
on the
Mais
side.
ça n'a servi mais à rien du tout.
It had absolutely no purpose.
C'est ces moments où tu as une conversation intéressante avec le producteur.
It's those moments when you wind up having an interesting conversation with your producer.
Il y a 2 moments, celui-là, puis le moment où tu as loué une grue qui ne servira jamais.
2 moments like that. One is the side camera that is never used. The other is when you've rented a crane that you don't use at all.
You know, if and when Brady comes back, we'll get all of you to talk. There's something sort of fascinating. Every single one
Mais il
of
va
you.
revenir, j'en suis sûr.
I'm sure he's going to come back.
Either that or you could pretend to be him. No,
Ou sinon, tu peux faire semblant que tu es Brady.
D'accord, si tu veux.
Every one of your films has a sequence in it, not a sequence, where one of your actors cries. One of the characters in your movie cries. And this is sort of like always the challenge. Okay, what are you going to do? How are you going to get this? How do you help? Do you help? And whatever. Is everything okay at home?
Yeah. Sorry,
No, it's okay. I just
My
wanna check
daughter
in.
has started walking alone in New York City for the first time in the last 6 months. And yes, it was. She wanted me to see her address that she got for an event.
Got it.
So she's fine.
Good. So speaking of walking, the question was, in fact, that one sequence where Felicity is, in fact, walking. Can you remember how that evolved and how you staged it and what you talked to your actors in rehearsing it, if you did?
Yeah, you know, the film, about 60% of the film is long sequence shots. It's for a variety of reasons. It's because generally the film is shot so quickly that we can generally afford to do one thing very well in the morning and one thing very well in the evening. And when you have more shots, you know, shooting a scene doesn't take a lot of time, but setting up for a scene, I mean, even if it's an insert of someone taking a cup off of a table, I mean, you can spend 3 hours on that. I mean, because it always looks wrong, and so there's formal reasons, of course. I mean, in the screenplay, you know, there are notes about the lens size, there are notes about, you know, what are sequence takes, which are not. But it's also so that no one can you know, touch it editorially. You know, I've learned to protect myself by not providing anyone with any options.
Except yourself.
Yes, I mean, to protect my film. You
No,
know.
but you're providing yourself with options.
No, I provide myself with no options because if I provide myself with options, I also provide everyone else with options. So it's very, very important to protect the integrity of the piece, that it cannot be cut. And for a film that, you know, was always going to be long, it was very, very important to me that no one had a way out. And so. No, I mean it. I mean, it's the John Ford way. It's like
I remember, if you use this close-ups, they'll use them. I got it.
Yeah, no, for sure. So, okay. So, but this sequence, the thing that was quite tricky about it is that, you know, VistaVision, because the film doesn't run vertically through the magazine, it runs horizontally. So, as it gathers in the mag, it starts to tip a Steadicam. So we had to figure out a sort of counterbalance system for it. Which was complex, and you know, essentially, it was a shot that was supposed to, you know, we're on a dolly for the first 2.5 or 3 minutes of the scene, and then we come off the dolly. And my extraordinary Steadicam operator, who you know I've worked with for years, and I don't like Steadicam very much. I don't like the glide. There's something about it that I prefer to be on. I prefer other devices if it's possible, but because of the upstairs, downstairs nature of the thing, it was really the only device. And my Steadicam operator, Attila, is just absolutely brilliant. You know, knows that I like everything to be very, very precise. You know, not a lot of finding it, and especially because of the celluloid gathering in the magazine and him having to constantly make adjustments. We only shot it 6 times, so we rehearsed it all morning and for many hours because there was a stunt in the middle of it. But then I'd said to Attila, when you come off of the dolly, you know, I was like, what's the best way? Because you have to choose a standard mode or a low mode. But when she's getting dragged across the floor, you know, I really wanted to be absolutely, you know, violent. So he was like, no problem. And he just started hitting the magazine over and over again. So the film is actually shaking in the gate. And it was quite remarkable, like to see it sort of, you know, when we got our scans back, it was like insane. So, you know, we had 6 takes. We had 5 ones that could have gone in the film. They were all really exquisite because I think everyone was so concerned about it. You know, the squeaky wheel gets the oil. It was something everyone was very nervous about. And then the first take was quite usable. I think we used take 4.
Tell me about talking to her and talking to them, because you have a big cast in this. Not a big cast, but you've got your key characters in the scene.
Yeah, it was
Harry
also
Harrison.
Felicity's second day. So it was a. You know, and Felicity is actually one of the few people that was working on in the cast that I'd known for many years. Mm-hmm. So I knew her since I was a teenager.
Got it.
And so, but still, you know, obviously, you know, we hadn't seen each other in a long time, and it was the first time that we were working together in, you know, this capacity. And I was just afraid also to hurt her, you know, because the only way to drag someone across the floor is to drag them across the floor. But she was really like a great sport about it, and you know, they were all such consummate pros that like, you know, no one missed a syllable. I was like very lucky to be working with a group of actors that were so technical, because that's not always the case. And I also don't expect actors to always be that technical. But they were a very well-oiled machine. So it actually went quite smoothly. It's always the simple things that you end up like. The wheelchair was broken, the one that we liked for the film. And this fucking wheelchair, like you could not get it over the threshold of a door. So we would shoot like any scene with this fucking wheelchair like over and over and over again, because it would always be the end or in the middle or whatever. So
what sought to be simple wasn't.
Exactly.
But here's in this shot, she makes this major accusation. This is one of the most sort of attack moments.
Sure.
Do you remember what you and she talked about, or did she just walk in and she got it and you were stepping back, or do you remember?
I think it was quite clear from the screenplay. Right. I mean, you know, the beats are written in, and I mean the screenplays are very, very they're very, very specific. And I think that, you know...
When you say specific, are we talking about there actually will be a line describing an emotion other than the dialogue?
No, not really emotion, but they're technically very specific. So it's like, you know, we pan here, we tilt here. And so it's quite, they kind of know from reading it sort of where those beats are. And then, of course, you respond to the rehearsal. There were a couple of things that were sort of in the wrong order, like sequentially in terms of dialogue and how it built. So we made some changes, but no, it was, you know, it went as smoothly as it really could have. But it's a beautiful sequence take, and there were things that were technically very complicated about it because it's one of the only scenes in the film that's lit for a 360 environment. And unfortunately, when you're lighting for a 360 environment, it can really look like a soap opera. And when you're making a melodrama that is a 1950s melodrama, you know, it can dip into soap opera really fast. Right. So I think that, you know, for Lowell, trying to find a way to shape the light in a space where there was really nowhere to hide was what was actually the most complex thing about it. But the performers, you know, I strongly recommend them. Like they showed up prepared.
Good actors are good actors,
yeah,
no question. Now, as I was saying, just there is something that happens in terms of performance in all of your films, which is that someone actually cries. And I'd like to hear you talk about it. And Edward, I'm going to start with you because there are two amazing scenes where Rafe does break down, one early on and one, that separate one when he's looking at the glasses. Talk about dealing with helping an actor cry.
Rafe doesn't need help, especially not from me when it comes to crying. So the first scene is not scripted. It just he just did it. I didn't expect it. But well, we spoke about you know, sentimentality or emotionality a lot before the movie, and about the restraint of the performance. You know, it had to be a restrained performance, and a restrained performance doesn't show emotion. You know, it doesn't cry a lot. But this dead Pope was near to him, and so when he, you know. And that shot came pretty much, it has a lot of, I knew that scene, I was really nervous about that scene because there's 5 guys in a tiny room, all need to be shot. And Rafe sees so many details. You know, the glasses of the Pope, he sees the Pope from this, the ring comes off. It had a lot of shots. It needed a lot of edits. And I had one day, and so a lot of, or even not a day, you know, so it just needed a lot of different shots, and I like good lighting. You know, I don't want to rush the camera because the light if the light's shit, I'm not going to use the shot. You know, so but by the time I did that close up on Rafe, which is the final shot of the scene, there was pretty much. Actually, it's not true. I probably started with him. You know, so just to get his close-ups out of the way. and or the wide shot, and then I just focused on Rafe. But it was his last shot for this, and then I would continue on the other ones. I think he just felt it, and then suddenly, after a long time of just staring, that one tear comes out, and I found it moving in its restrained way, so I kept it in the movie, even though you have to wait for it for 30 seconds. But it's just, he holds it. Because the magic of Rafe is why I wanted him in the movie. I see everything he's thinking. He just he does nothing, and I see all his thoughts. And that's the film, that's the entire film.
But the willingness that you had, and I suspect all of you had, to not say cut and allow something to still happen. Where have you learned that?
Well, yeah, if nothing had happened, then you say cut. But it's like, but because the actor's probably waiting for you. When the hell is he going to say cut? But you sort of feel that, but the stuff went on his face, and so I just, remember Michael Clayton, George Clooney's last shot. It's one of my favorite endings ever.
Yep.
It's like a minute on just George Clooney's face at the end of the film, and just trusting George Clooney, who goes through that journey.
By the way,
trusting Rafe.
I will tell you this: the director who was up here one day
Yeah.
told us about that shot, and I asked. He didn't know what to say to the actor, and the actor did it, George Clooney. And afterwards, he said, "What did you do in this one shot?" And George said, "I ran the entire movie in my head."
Yeah, exactly. And that's, Rafe went. You see it in Rafe's face. He was thinking about, probably, I never asked him, but he probably went through his relationship with the dead guy, and the lost friendship, and actually the pain that he had because they parted in bad ways. And so the other scene is Rafe. We actually did talk about that because that was I don't even remember if it was in the script or if Rafe said, I think there should be one moment where I do it. And I say, yeah, I think if we do it, it should be here. Or maybe it was in a different part of the script, and we knew it couldn't work. And so we eventually zeroed in on this moment. That happens very often, that you shift crying scenes around because the actor says, I'm not going to be able to cry in this scene. Or I'd rather play it still. And I think it should come out 10 minutes later, in a delayed emotional response. So I do that a lot, just shifting that around. And so we zeroed in on that scene, probably because he said, I could imagine doing it there. And he did say, I can't cry many times. I can maybe do it once or twice, and it's very hard for me. He said that. And I don't know if it's going to come, actually. And I said, well, if it doesn't come, we don't need him to cry, it'll work him just staring at it. And so we do the scene, and I line it up with I think again with me as a stand-in or something, or the AD probably sitting there, and Stefan goes on the floor and put the camera lower. And then I show it to Rafe. Eventually Rafe walks in, and I know he feels the pressure of having to do it, and he's very concentrated, almost to the level of autism concentration, but in a lovely, lovely way. And then so he comes in, and he just sits there, and I say okay, here's the camera, and so he starts doing it, and he basically just cries in the close-up, and the other shots. And I did ask him, what do you want to start with? Wide shot, just, to get, and he said, in this case, let's start with the close-up. And so I put the camera there, and then he does it, and I'm really particular about camera height, and, do you see the eyes? Do you not see the eyes? Because if it's 5 centimeters too high, 2 inches too high, it's wrong. It just doesn't work. It doesn't have the impact. And so he does it, and of course he slumps in his seat, and Stefan tries to get lower, is in the wrong position, and I go oh fuck, I'm not seeing it. And he told me before, I can cry once, and so I thought all right, we really screwed this. And I go in, and I ignored Rafe, actually, and I said to Stefan, you're gonna have to come lower, and I think we were on some kind of what do you call it, bazooka. And so we just lowered it a little bit. And then I said, okay, Rafe, let's do it again. But he was wonderful. We just did it again, you know? And then it actually was much better. And in that case, we were maybe this much lower. It made all the difference.
Wow.
It really made, or maybe even 5 centimeters. It made all the difference. And the first take, I never felt anything. And the second take really moved me. But then also, you know, I stay on that take for a long time because before he cries. And that's the irony of the thing. So he takes forever to start crying. He just stares at a pair of broken glasses or something. And then eventually, the memory of it, and he goes through it, you know, the memory of it takes forever, and then finally he starts crying. The moment he starts crying, I actually cut to his back and to a wide shot and him just sitting there because I think it's stronger than the tears in the face.
Well, it's an interesting question. Do you show the tears or do you make us cry? Which is an interesting issue. James, I know you don't have a lot of tears, but Sylvie gets there at least a couple times, Miss Founding. Do you remember talking to her about that? Or
No,
was that?
I mean, this whole question makes me uncomfortable for some reason. It's like, it's a physiological response.
Right.
To talk about it with actors too much is to, I mean, just what Edward was describing, you get in this weird pressurized, I can only do it once, and blah, it all is so fucked up that I mean, the best way I can answer this question is, some people think of acting as lying. I think of acting as telling the truth. Okay, so, and so many people talk about acting as lying, as becoming, as putting on, as opposed to being. So crying is going there. And therefore, and it's one way to solve a scene, but it's not the only way to solve a scene. There's ways to talk about it where I need to feel you open up here. I need to feel vulnerability to what she or he is saying here without getting into, I want you to have a bead of sweat come out of your temple at this moment. And that, I mean, even if your goal is that you would like in your imagination for the actor to cry, whatever that means, because sometimes that can mean the worst acting you've ever seen, in a scene, because actors live in truth, they're good at spotting liars because people lie to them all day. You're so awesome, you know. They don't believe you. So the point is, they know if Edward wants him to cry, or I want him to cry, or Brady, or if any of us want or have an expectation of that in the scene, they fucking knew that weeks ago. They read the script. They know. You don't need to say it. Like, you don't need to label it. You don't need to create pressure around it. You need to whisper and tippy toe, and maybe you'd like to cry. How does that help? Maybe. Well, how does that help anyone? That's like, does the maybe take the pressure away? No. And so it all becomes a quagmire, which friendship with the actor, allyship, being in league and sync with one another, understanding the scene, understanding the anxieties the actor may feel about failing you to achieve the thing you need. It's all a complex thing, but the number one thing goes back to, if you deal with actors in truth, if you go, I imagined you crying, but I'm not sure, I think you could also do this or this, if that is what you need to do, but whatever it is, tell them the truth. If you did always imagine them crying, and they ask you about it, don't start lying, because then they'll know you're lying. But the point is also, as a filmmaker, I try to understand that you can go into that well and actually come out with something that feels saccharine.
Right.
So that the point is that they're in the scene, and what's right for the scene is happening. And we're thinking of Edwards. Ray Fiennes holds the lens, whether there's water in his eye or not.
By the way, when Sylvie does have that, do you remember it?
When Sylvie what?
She gets moved a couple times while she's watching.
Yeah, we never talked about it.
You didn't, and that was just there.
But I hardly talk about anything. I mean,
well, you're talking now. Come on.
No, but I mean that specific stuff like that it's just, to me, if you're working with good actors, Brady was saying, it's just so clear what the beats of the scene are. I mean, she's standing backstage watching the man she's loved and broken up with on and off groove with Joan Baez on stage. It's like, well, what do you think I want her to do? Laugh or cackle? Like, it's like so the point would be, and I think this is the big thing for me with actors, intellectualizing about the script can be the one thing we were talking about earlier with kind of literary analysis, but could also be just over-talking expectations for the moment. And this is speaking for myself, my goal is that the performance blossoms in that take, that it doesn't pop in a rehearsal, that it doesn't happen in a trailer, that it doesn't happen on a Zoom call, that the moment where they nail it is in the moment, the camera is in the right place. And so it is this kind of synergistic dance with your actor that is unspoken about trying to arrive at your mutually land at the same destination.
Let me pick up on that.
Yeah.
Then on a scene where that's true, and this is actually the organic response of honesty that you're talking about, but you may say, I want to do another take. What's that going to be based on if you felt that true?
I generally shoot until I see shit start to plateau or go down. I don't see any reason. I mean, why are we here? We're here to shoot. We did all this shit to get here and shoot. Like, I'm thinking of George Clooney or Rafe. Why are they going to be troubled if he takes a long time to say cut? That's all fucking reason he's here. He's in a close-up in the movie. What, he wants to be back negotiating with his agent in the trailer? He wants to be in a close-up.
Go back to your thing of I want another take. What's that going to be based on?
My take would be...
No, I want another take. You're saying to the actor, I want to do one more. What's that going to be based on? In terms of what
I just said, if it's still going up, if it's getting interesting, why stop?
So you'll do another take because there might be something better might evolve.
This idea of going, I got a good one, I'm good enough. Like, I go, well, I like to feel like something. I like to feel, and I tend to think most actors like to feel like they got a shot at shaping it, and then you and they know the second they're squeezing the rag or kind of the orange, it's just kind of like I kind of tapped out on that, and that's when, if you keep doing takes, you're gonna. I mean, any one of us would feel it. Do it again. It's like I'm burnt, and can't you? Are you so insensitive that you don't see that nothing's of worth is coming from this?
Yeah. The end of Anora is a remarkable moment in terms of performance. Can you, and I'll say tears are there, but that's not really the issue, but certainly she breaks down, which is sometimes what tears come from.
Yeah.
Can you talk about how you evolved that scene?
Well, we kept pushing it further and further back in our schedule because we wanted to shoot in actual snow. And it was the first New York winter with no snow, and like, so it was actually a lot of stress building up with everybody. Everybody was anticipating this, especially Mikey. In the moment, and then of course when we actually had to shoot over the course of 3 days because of logistics. The sun creeping up over the building behind Yura, us permitting issues, just stuff like that. And so even within. When we actually got to shooting, there was a lot of stress going on. A lot of, at one point the NYPD was kicking our cones because we went over. So, but inside that car, just to break the fourth wall, I'm literally like 1.5 feet behind Mikey and Yura in the back seat with the monitor, just talking with them. And I think what happened is that after the first few takes of that last shot, what was going on was that the snow was building, the fake snow was building up on the windows, and we became, in a way, snowed in. It was just the three of us. It was very intimate, and I think that is what allowed Mikey to get there. And it did take a few takes, and she did have her own tools. I won't disclose that because that's her business. But what got her to that place, and I needed the tears. I absolutely needed the actual crying, the waterworks, as she put it. And I remember I saw this wonderful documentary about the making of The Idiots, Lars von Trier's The Idiots. And there's a great, when they're trying to get that last tear at the end of the film, and he couldn't get it at first, and the actress wasn't crying, and from what the documentary made it seem like, it took hours. But he just stood there with the camera. We're not wrapping until we get that. And that taught me a lot. Yeah, no, you can't move on till if you need tears, you got to get them. So we just spend the time, and it was probably about 5 takes in, and she got that one single tear take. And I remember seeing it over, I actually looked away from the monitor and just watched it come down her cheek. And I said, I know that's the one. I know that's the one. We did one more for safety. I always do the one for safety. And of course, it wasn't nearly as good. And so that was the one we went with. That single tear, that was, it was so much more powerful with a one tear than bawling.
You just said something that I want you to explore a little bit more, which is the actor, human being, using the resources that they have. Yeah. You mentioned it too, Edward, and the character that they're supposed to play. Yeah. And how you as a director communicate to, quote, that same person. So you might know something personal about, her that you might have said, is this, but you said it was private. But yes. I'm interested in that dialogue, because we have that dialogue between what the character's going to do and who you are as a human being bringing it to the character.
Well, in the case of Mikey and Annie, I think that by the time it actually was a blessing, we kept pushing it further and further back in the shoot, because she experienced Annie's ordeal. I mean, we shot it after the mansion. We shot it after the rejection she gets at the club when they finally meet Yvonne. She saw all of this happen. She lived all of this through Annie. So I think that very little, we of course we talked about it. We talked about the emotionality, of course, but I didn't need to do that much. She was there. She was ready.
Because she had lived it.
She had lived Annie for 2 months at that point.
Got it. There is an amazing crying, laughing sequence in Emilia Perez when she's in the taxi. And I would like you to talk about that sequence.
Ah ben j'aime bien ça. J'aime bien ta question.
I like your question.
I like your answer.
Mais parce que tu l'as remarqué. La conversation que je trouve passionnante sur les larmes, c'est que comment on sait que c'est comme l'amour physique au cinéma, c'est comme les fusillades, on sait que c'est faux. Et ça interroge le film sur sa vraisemblance.
I like your question because you noticed. I find this conversation about tears fascinating because tears, like the sex act in film or guns going off in films, we know that that's fake, and that's what's interesting.
Et ça interroge le réel du film, la possibilité de vraisemblance du film.
And so it raises the question of the reality of the film, the possibility of verisimilitude of the film.
Et donc ce que je voulais, moi, dans cette scène-là, effectivement, c'était... par exemple, j'aime beaucoup que les larmes... Il y a un film de Minelli, de Bad and the Beautiful, où il y a une scène de larmes qui est irrésistible de drôlerie.
What I wanted with that scene, for example, there's a Minnelli film, The Bad and the Beautiful, where there's a crying scene that's irresistibly funny.
To the agents. To the agency. It's incredible. Et ce que je voulais, justement, dans cette scène-là, c'était que ce soit ni tout à fait des larmes, ni tout à fait du rire, que ce soit quelque chose entre les deux, d'un petit peu... On sent qu'elle est un peu frappée à ce moment-là.
What I wanted for my scene is that it would be neither completely crying nor completely laughing, that it was something between the two and that we could feel that she was kind of nuts at that moment.
So what did you say to her?
So what?
Qu'est-ce que tu lui as dit?
Ben, je lui ai dit, tu sais, par exemple, moi je crois que c'est vachement difficile. Pourquoi les larmes, c'est difficile? Tu vas dire à l'actrice ou à l'acteur, bon, tu pleures maintenant.
The reason I find tears so hard is, are you going to say to the actor or actress, okay, cry now?
Et si l'acteur te demande, mais tu veux que je pense à quoi? Bah, tu lui réponds quoi? Pense à ta feuille d'impôt.
And if the actor says, well, what do you want me to think about? I mean, what am I supposed to say? Think about your tax bill?
Non, donc ça ne marche pas, tu vois. Dans tous les cas, ça ne marche pas. Alors moi, dans les scènes, quand je laisse l'acteur faire. ou l'actrice faire. Je ne peux pas lui dire oh, tu pleures pas assez, ça coule pas assez. Je pourrais lui dire grimace moins peut-être, mais c'est tout.
You know, so that kind of thing never works. What I do is I let the actor or the actress do what he or she is going to do. You know, I can't say you're not crying enough or cry less. I mean, maybe the only thing I could say is stop making a weird face.
Dans ces cas-là, je me mets plutôt dans une position de metteur en scène. Tu sais, quand tu es au théâtre, tu es à 15 mètres, 20 mètres, que doit jouer si l'acteur est censé pleurer ou l'actrice censée pleurer, que va-t-elle faire?
In those cases, I take the role more of a theater director, where you know you're 50 feet away, you're at the back of the room, and you're just wondering, what's the actor going to do?
Le gros plan du cinéma pose différemment la question. Et je pense que les acteurs américains aiment pleurer.
The film close-up raises the question differently, and I think that American actors like to cry.
Ou alors ça fait partie du registre du jeu.
Or else it's part of their register of acting.
Ça m'est arrivé une fois avec, de répéter une scène comme ça, une scène qui était dramatique. Et on l'avait répété, on avait répété les mouvements, tout ça. Et puis hop, moteur, action, et paf, il se met à pleurer. Mais j'avais rien demandé.
This happened to me once. I won't name names, but we had rehearsed this very dramatic scene. We had set the movements and everything. And then, you know, I say, action, the camera starts rolling, and boom, he starts crying. And I hadn't asked for anything.
Mais après, quand tu as commencé comme ça, qu'est-ce que tu fais si tu dis on pleure plus maintenant?
And, you know, if you've started there, what are you going to do afterwards? Okay, let's not cry anymore.
Alors, et l'acteur peut te répondre, mais je peux pleurer différemment si tu veux.
And then the actor might answer, but I can cry differently if you want.
Et là, normalement, c'est la fin de journée.
And normally that's a wrap for the day.
But did you tell Zoe that you did want her to make this transition from tears to laughter? Did she know that?
Oui.
She knew.
Got it. And do you remember?
Mais après, c'est elle qui s'est complètement dirigée dans la scène.
But after that, she's the one who completely directed herself in the scene.
Got it. Did you do a number of takes?
Tu as fait plusieurs prises?
De mémoire, là, t'es dur.
You're being a little tough on me, asking me to remember that.
Oh, okay.
Non, mais je pense pas, non, forcément pas trop, tu vois, deux.
Obviously, not too many, you know, a couple takes.
Sure, I got it. Tears. There is an amazing moment when he meets, I guess, his cousin when he gets off the train, and talked to Agent Brody. And can you talk about how that one happened?
Sure. No, sorry. I mean, it's hard to speak more eloquently on the subject than all of my, you know, esteemed colleagues up here. You know, the role of a director, you know, you're conducting an orchestra. You're not the first chair cellist, you know, and so you're responding and you're conducting, you know, a little more, a little less, a little more, a little less. And you try to create an environment which is going to, you know, be conducive to whatever it is, you know, that you're trying to achieve, whether it's a very intimate scene or a very loud scene, a very quiet scene. You know, it's described in the screenplay that he wails in his cousin's arms, and so, you know, he knew what to do, and then, you know, we tried variations of that. You know, I think most importantly, what was mentioned, you know, earlier about at a certain point you feel that everyone's all tuckered out, and it's you know, the peak is the plateau, and then it's done, and then you move on. So, you know, I'm really just the first viewer. The role of a director is to not only curate, but just to respond. And so,
Audience of one.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that there's something quite interesting, which is that because I grew up working with so many filmmakers, you know, the best filmmakers that I worked with, including Lars von Trier, and The Idiots is probably my favorite film of the 1990s. But you know, they don't play the role of the director. They just are directing the film. And it's a funny thing because I think that especially in the beginning of one's career, I think people feel a responsibility to perform the role of the maestro, you know? But it's quite silly because it's a very labor-intensive job, and you know it's collaborative and it's complicated, and you have good days and you have bad days. But it's not, you know, you're not just manipulating everybody all the time. Everyone, you're usually working with, you know, like very, very seasoned professionals, and they read the screenplay and they kind of, you know, they do whatever they need to do to get there.
When you were watching this moment, because it really is an incredible expression, it said Wales. Do you remember your response as the audience to that moment? Do you remember? Do you remember it?
Yeah, I thought it was quite good, and you know, it was shot with 2 cameras, which I do very little cross shooting, but I wanted there to be this very specific 90-degree cut, and so we shot it that way in the event that if it actually worked, that we'd have it from both sides, and because I wanted the master of the bus to be on a large format, and I wanted the profile to be on a 3-perf camera. So that's what we did. And the thing is, the large format camera is like a sewing machine. It's very, very loud. There's actually only one blimp for it in the world, which I think Giovanni Ribisi owns, curiously enough. But we didn't have it, and so. You know, everyone had to get sort of accustomed to this thing. You know, it's very loud.
Right.
Now it's easy to remove in post. You know, because
But your actors are actually hearing it.
Yeah. They had to get accustomed to it, and we'd throw blankets over it and stuff to try and dampen it down a little bit. But because it's a repetitive pattern, there are, you know, many tools that can just remove it like that.
Got it. This is going to be my sort of last question for you. It's a big question, so but I'd like to deal with post-production and talk about your process of not so much working with the final mix, but your process in editing and how you approach it, and what shifts for you. And Brady, go with that, and we'll come around.
The post-production process for me is usually my favorite part of the process, because you're sitting there with your footage, and you know you've been like Sisyphus for fucking years, and the boulder keeps rolling back down the hill, but finally you have the footage, and there's only a few ways to put that footage together, at least in a way that, you know, makes sense, and so. At that point, it becomes sort of, you know, it's a puzzle and it's problem solving, and there's even if you shoot 14 takes of something, of course you can dialogue edit it, you know, for weeks. So it's because I'm shooting mostly long sequence takes, I'm only usually working on the sound. So it's, you know, the offline, the post-production process for The Brutalist was 22 months. But the offline, the editorial, that was only 12 weeks because it could only go together one way.
Got it.
So do you work in and out with your editor? Are you in the room all the time? And what's your relationship? I am in every room all the time. I'm in every room. There's no, I can't, I truly, it doesn't work for me. To not be a part of any part of the process. We graded the film for 39 days. I was grading it there for 39 days. Every single print that we made of the film, I personally reviewed. It was exhausting, and because it really taught me a lesson to make the next movie a little bit shorter. But I'm like, But really, I was really getting like a taste of my own medicine.
But the point is, you are there all the time. This is not.
Yeah, no, of course, because the thing is that, you know, there is no part of the of making a film which is not very, very important. I can't give something to a dialogue editor. I don't understand that at all. I just don't get it. Or a music editor, I have no idea what that even means. I'm working with a very small group of people, and we do it. You know, for 22 months essentially we were a crew of like 4 people.
Got it.
And but the mix was complicated because we couldn't afford to mix the film for longer than a month. A month was already a luxury. So to finish a film that was so long in 4 weeks,
That was tough.
it meant that we had to work, you know, sometimes 18, 19-hour days.
Wow. Got it.
And so fortunately my team was very patient with me and everyone cared. But you know, there's no such thing as overtime, really.
Got it.
So it just,
Got it.
but yeah, and then, you know, I think that post-production is it's a relief in a way, because you can't make any more, you know, you've run, you've had to make so many decisions for years. And finally, it sort of becomes door number 1 or door number 2.
Got it. It's good. Well, door number 2 for Jacques, your post-production process on this film. Talking specifically more about editing, if you will.
Du montage.
Tu vas voir que, comme Emilia Pérez étant un musical, c'est un petit peu différent quand même.
You'll have to admit that since Emilia Perez is a musical, that changes things somewhat.
Il y a vraiment plusieurs couches de prise de son, de plusieurs types de mixage, etc. Alors, j'ai pas il faut plutôt que je mette l'exemple Emilia Pérez de côté et que je parle de ma façon de travailler habituelle, parce qu'elle n'a pas changé.
So, you know, with a musical, there's several layers, there's several different layers of sound takes, types of mixing. I think it's best if I put the example of Emilia Perez aside and talk about my general process, which has always been the same.
Alors comment je travaille avec Juliette Welfling, la même monteuse depuis mon premier film.
So I work with Juliette Welfling, who is the editor I've worked with since my first feature.
Donc elle en a monté 10.
She's edited 10 of my films.
On s'est connus quand on était assistant monteur il y a 1000 ans.
We met when we were assistant editors about 1,000 years ago.
Et que quand je tourne, ce que je disais tout à l'heure, je ne regarde pas les rushs. C'est Juliette les regarde, quand quelque chose ne va pas, elle me le signale.
So when I shoot, as I was saying, I don't look at the dailies. Juliette looks at them, and if something's wrong, she lets me know.
Que c'est elle qui fait, elle arrive elle commence à monter une semaine ou 10 jours après le début du tournage.
She starts editing 1 week or 10 days into the shoot.
C'est elle qui fait tous les choix.
She makes all the choices.
Et qu'à la fin du tournage, elle me présente 10 jours, 15 jours après la fin du tournage, elle me présente un premier montage qui ne doit pas dépasser de plus de 10 minutes le minutage de la script.
So 10 or 15 days after the end of the shoot, she shows me a rough cut, which must not be more than 10 minutes beyond what the script supervisor calculated.
Et à partir de là, on commence à travailler.
And that's where we start working.
Et que moi, j'ai le sentiment, c'est un sentiment qui s'est de nombreuses fois répété, c'est que j'ai le sentiment que je n'ai plus à intervenir sur le film la première semaine de mixage, où là, tout à coup, tous les paramètres sont placés, et c'est le film auquel j'avais pensé, en fait.
C'est à partir de
C'est la première semaine de mixage. Oui.
Là, tu arrêtes d'intervenir ou tu commences.
Ah bah, non, j'arrête d'intervenir. Ça, okay. Le film est là.
So I have this feeling, and it's a feeling that has been repeated numerous times now, which is that I no longer need to intervene in the film once we reach the first week of mixing. At that point, the film is there.
Et contrairement à Brady, je ne vais pas tout le temps à la salle de montage parce que Juliette ne veut pas me voir.
And unlike Brady, I don't go to the editing room all the time because Juliette doesn't want to see me.
We'll stop there.
Mais on s'aime beaucoup.
But we really like each other.
Edward, tell us your post-production process, particularly editing. This is our last question. So,
I love it. I think to me it's also my favorite part because now you're just basically 2-3 people sitting in a room, and I love and I love all the parts, but editing is like quite relaxing to me. First it starts and you are very nervous about, because you see the film first and actually think it's super boring because it's too long, and I don't know, you see all the mistakes that you made right up there on the screen, and you panic a little bit, and then you start, okay, let's start working, and you start with the first scene, and you think, oh, it's actually kind of like we thought it would be. You realize it's all there, or you think like, oh shit, I really screwed up that performance on that day. You go through the text, you say, oh no, we did another one, and it's actually better. So bit by bit, you find that it's actually there, and the reason why you moved on the day had a reason, And then with this film in particular, but I think I've discovered that depends on the movie. Again, it's like Sean's film's the opposite, but the lesser cuts, the better. So the first edit, probably the assembly, probably had 10 times as many edits, like just going back and forth on the lines and covering everything. And then this time I just said, like, why are we cutting so much? It's much more interesting to just stay on Rafe, stay on Isabella, and cut in the right moment. Just cut in the right moment. And I also had the idea of just using every shot once. I didn't want to cut back to the same shot again. Fincher does that beautifully, I think. He just puts the camera in a point to make a point. It makes a point. And on this movie, Pakula was a big idol. And if you watch, what's the movie?
President's Man?
No, Parallax View. Parallax View. There's a scene where Warren Beatty, the star of the movie, producer of the movie, is from behind for 2 minutes in the dark.
Yeah.
And it just cuts around once in the mid shot onto him at the right moment. And so the director, Pakula, directs the audience's gaze, like that's part of it.
Got it.
And so here I just wanted to cut when actually the one moment the scene shifts, and then cut to the reaction, and just stay on the reaction. And I also found that you can destroy a performance with editing. You can shape it, but you can also destroy it. And just staying on these wonderful actors, staying on their emotional interior. Again, it's the interior journey. I wasn't so much interested in the plot, but on the interior journey and how they change from one emotional state to another emotional state on a scene. You can best see actually when the take's uncut, because they do it, as the scene unfolds.
Got it. James, for you, post-production, particularly editing?
I love it. So much, it's so interesting to hear how everyone processes it. I mean, there's several different things that come to mind to say. One is, I think, I've tried to, over the years, try and do away with this kind of editor's cut thing, where you're gonna not look at your movie until they show you your movie. I can't take it. It's like enforced mass depression. Like, here, confront your movie where we contradicted anything you wanted us to do, and it's 4 hours long, and you're gonna, and now deal with it. And no, it's a part of my life I'm editing out of my life. So I try and cut with them while I'm shooting. I learn from my footage. They learn from my reactions to the cuts. We're sooner to having a movie, which is always good, because studios or financiers can be nervous. So you want your shit looking good as soon as possible, that you can at least show them a nugget and make them go, oh, fuck, it's a movie. And then they go away. But the other parts are the interesting things to me are in narrative, dramatic films. One is, I do feel, I agree with Edward that every discipline can exercise their discipline too much. If you have a funny or romantic scene, if you're a romantic scene in a movie, the costume designer is going to go romantic. The production designer is going to suddenly put gauze on the windows. The DP is going to pull out the smoke machine and the low angle light. And you have 12 hats on a hat. And the scene is not even slightly romantic unless it's like a tunnel of love. Or and the same could be said for a funny scene. Composer's going to write funny music. Actors are going to act funny. Costume designer puts on a funny hat. And they've destroyed the comedy in the scene. So you are very often, even in editorial, playing a traffic cop for not anyone being wrong, but everyone in the orchestra can't hit the same note at the same time. And they're all anxious. They want to contribute. Similarly, editors are going to cut because that's the only thing they can do. And so it isn't bad to see what the scene looks like cut more aggressively. And I'm also a big proponent that I think in the last 20 years, I think there's been this kind of ludicrous, almost like cutting is some kind of tragedy that I had to cut. And it's like, so did D.W. Griffith. It's okay. Like that this oneer, like this kind of athletic kind of stunt pursuit of the endless oneer. Well, I guess it's already been achieved now, but it's like, it's still always a lie. There's some digital glue putting it together. It's like the cut can be beautiful. The single take can be beautiful. All these things have their roles. But editing is a joy for me. But I guess the last thing I'd say is that it's all writing. Like one of the things that can make it hardest to make movies is I mean, I love the DGA, I love all the guilds, but everything's so divided and we think we talk, but it's really not, you know? Writing is shooting is writing, editing is writing, and it's like, you can't say it, but it's the fucking truth. It's like, you're all shaping the narrative. And being someone, you kind of have permission to say it if you do all three, but the reality is that they are not separate. They are they are a giant continuance from inception through the final mix. And that's why Brady's there all the time. And that's why, we're all there all the time. Yeah.
Sean not only says casting, but sometimes it says editor.
Oh yeah, always.
Let's talk about your approach.
But I wish I wasn't going to. We got to talk afterwards because you guys got to give me pointers. Because to tell you the truth, it's for me, it's like life shattering every time. It's like literally my life falling apart.
Yep.
Up until Florida Project, my post-production caused a separation with, not only a permanent separation with my significant other, one time being a divorce. It is not fun for me because I'm stuck with this footage that I can't go back. I can't do pickups. I have to work with this. And so it's and also my whole process is ridiculous. I wait 3 months before, and I've had that luxury, and I consider that a luxury. But I usually take about 3 to 4 months off before even looking at the footage. And my financiers have been cool about that. And I
Why?
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 Because I want distance. I want to forget what I've shot.
But if it's making you so miserable doing it the way you're doing it.
Yeah, I agree. I know that's why we have to talk. I had a therapist.
That's the conversation you're going to have this evening. That'll happen tonight. Keep going, though.
Okay,
You got this 3 months.
I'm also a vampire. When I edit, I become a vampire, which is very sad because it's 8 months of living at night. You wake up at 5 p.m., you do your thing, you take a hike with the dog, breakfast, all that. Then you start editing at like 9 or 10 p.m. and go till dawn. And you have to live that way. It's not a healthy lifestyle. And I also do it on my own. I have an AE who comes in once every 2 months if I have a corrupt file. But it's,
What are you cutting on?
Premiere Pro on my phone, on my Mac. And that's it. And it really sucks until and I also edit in order. I don't do an assemble. I refuse to do it. I hate assembles because I hate bad first impressions. Yeah. I want everybody to see the film as fine as I can get. So I start from the beginning and I just go in order. I don't reference the script supervisor book if you even have one. We didn't have one under Nora. I just make, I know what I wrote, so I'm making it happen. And I can feel the pace that way. That's why I do it. I can feel it evolve and grow, and I know when I can play with tones and when I can bring my comedy up, when I have to bring it down, stuff like that. But the stress-inducing part of this is that you don't know whether you've made a good movie until the last day of editing when you tag that last shot on. So you're living with stress for a year. And the one last anecdote I want to say about this one, and I'll never do this again. This was really terrible. About 3 weeks out from shooting, I had to sign a deal for one of my foreign distributors that I had to bring in the film at 2:10. And I knew in my heart, I wrote the screenplay, I knew it was around 2:15, and it ends up being 2:18. And I knew it. And I had to sign this in order for the pre-sale to happen, in order for the film to be made. And that was one of the I will never do that again. That was living with stress for an entire year, especially when I got over the 2:10 mark and I was in a fine cut and I felt it was the last few months leading up was really hard. And guess what happened? We showed it, not a note, not a freaking note. And I was like, that was self-imposed stress that I will never have to do. I'll never sign something like that
I'm
again.
so glad you've got to learn something from your own process.
Yes.
Here's the thing. From your processes, you've taught us an enormous amount in this short amount of time. And we have to thank you for being these hammers that make cinema a better experience. Thank you for being who you are.
Thank you.
Thank you.